another edition of Singles Only Podcast. My name is Paul Farahvar. I am your host. On this episode, we have author of the book, How to Be Alone, and the creator of Tinder Live, Lane Moore. She's awesome. Musician, comedian, everything. Love this episode. No voice of reason. We did this on Zoom, so you can watch the video on my YouTube page if you aren't doing that already, which is youtube.com/Paul F Comedy. Check out my website, Paul F Comedy, for upcoming dates. I do have shows finally on the books again for now. Knock on something. This isn't wood, but I'll make that work. If you haven't already, subscribe, review, tell your friends, share the ones you like. Message me with your thoughts on anything and or guests you think I should have. That's at pfarahvar@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram. And most importantly, please continue to check out and support our sponsors. Hey, Singles Only folks. Have I ever steered you wrong? Have I ever, giving you bad advice? I've been here for 4 years now for some of you guys. The longest relationship I've ever been in is with this podcast. And I've given you everything I can. I brought guests that have informed you, entertained you, told you how to date, told you how not to date. And now I'm bringing you another tool, a superpower, if you will. It's called the Keys Dating Keyboard. You download this app, and it saves you thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in dating. What it is it has messages for every situation: breaking the ice, being flirty, responding to something that was asked of you, or most importantly, breaking up with someone or ending things. Instead of ghosting, you can be a responsible person and choose multiple different responses. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen. When I saw this app, I was like, I need to get this to my folks. And, it's been proven that singles spend over 8,000 messages, hours on apps until they find what they're looking for. Well, this is going to save you so much more time. It's a free app for you guys. That's what I'm going to do for you. You guys download the app. It's if you Google dating keyboard keys or keys keyboard, it's going to pop up. Promo code singles only, free. Boom. Don't tell me I don't do anything for you guys. So it's being, only certain people have access to this, but you guys are going to be ones that have it. You guys are basically going to be testers on this app. And I'm inviting you to listen to this, to use it, and before it's released to the general public, tell me what you think. Download the app, use the password singles only to get in. Anyone that signs up will be free for 1 year. 1 year of free usage. I don't know what else to tell you. I am doing everything I can to get you guys to stop listening to this podcast and find love, whatever the hell that means. Keys Dating Keyboard. Promo code singles only. You're welcome. Listen, I'm a lawyer. I talk about it often. But when I have legal questions or I have legal issues that I'm facing, I go to my friend Scott Shapiro. So if you've been injured on the job, need compensation, you might be entitled to money that you don't even know about. And that holds true for workers' compensation, personal injury, all that stuff. My friend Scott Shapiro has been helping injured workers and doing entertainment law for almost 20 years now. You need to contact him, 312-648-8800, or email him at scott@scottshapirolegal.com. He is legitimately one of the best people and best lawyers I know. If you call him, you tell him Singles Only sent you or I sent you, it's a free consultation. Granted, it's a free consultation anyway, probably, but boom, just throw my name so I can stay in business here. He is a full-service law firm. In addition to workers' compensation cases, work injuries, he handles litigation. He handles all your legal needs for entertainment law. So those of you who are entertainers out there, have legal questions, he's your guy. Again, free consultation. Don't take a chance and not get a lawyer. 312-648-8800, or check out his website, scottshapirolegal.com. Listen, I told you I had a special treat for listeners, loyal listeners of the show, Singles Only. And here it is. You heard me talk about the book Perfect Pain, which is a memoir by my friend Param Farahvar. It's an awesome book about his journey, his life journey of how he had this perfect life on paper, family, successful career, money, everything, but he had an underlying pain that he didn't address. And this book addresses that. It addresses his life in an amazing way. He had such a cool life, and he had some personal demons that he struggled with. And through therapy, he conquers that. It's a great book. I don't want to ruin it for you guys. Read it, perfectpain.com. But here's what I'm going to do. I talked to the author, Param Farahvar, and he is going to let me give away a book every week. Here's what you have to do to get a free book. Subscribe to the podcast and give us a review. Once you've given us a review, 5-star review, message me and tell me you did it, and I'm going to send you the book. One a week. We're going to do this until we run out of books. I've got 22 to give away, it sounds like. So perfectpain.com if you want to buy the book, available on Amazon and available in audiobook too. But if you are a listener of this podcast, all you got to do is review this podcast and then message me and say, hey, I reviewed it. Or if there's a way to contact you, I'll figure it out. And you're going to get a book sent to you. You don't even have to leave your house. You're going to get a free book. Once a week, I'm doing this for the book Perfect Pain by Param Farahvar. It's a great book. I want everyone to read it. I want to make this a bestseller and get the Farahvar bump, the singles only bump. So buy it today or give us a review and get your free copy. And when you like it, don't lend it to other people. Make them buy it too, because it supports this author and this journey. Perfect Pain, Param Farahvar. It's time for another edition of Singles Only Podcast. My name is Paul Farahvar. We have no voice of reason on this episode because we're doing it by Zoom. We do have, however, the author of the book, How to Be Alone, and the creator of Tinder Live. I've been trying to get a hold of this guest for a while. Lane Moore, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited to. Yeah, and while we're all just like stuck inside.
Yeah, right?
Being single as hell, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about doing it live when you were through Chicago and it just couldn't match up. But I'm like, you know what? Now I'm doing these on Zoom, so it should be easier.
Yeah.
I do want to say when I read this book and I hit you up, I gave an awesome review because it's a great read. It's perfect. It reminds me of touring on the road, which we were talking about before, because I was reading it while I was working out at gyms on the road. Like this was my workout book. So
yeah, I love that. I love hearing that from like fellow touring comics and touring musicians that were like, I got it on tour, and I was like, that makes all of the sense because you're so alone as hell.
Yeah, it's so perfect. And I always ask guests like, why are you single? And then what do they want to do? But for you, it's like, this is an empowering book. And I think it's like a book where people need to step aside and be like, look, sometimes it's okay to be alone. It doesn't mean you're lonely. It doesn't mean like you want to get in a relationship. And I think this is a book that people need to read. So I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think when they were like, what do you want the subheading to be? I was like, I would love for it to be like how to be alone if you want to and even if you don't, because there's two types of people who feel alone or are alone, right? There's like people who are like, I want to be alone. And usually that's because like a lot of us, you've been hurt and you're like, screw it. I don't want to date anymore. I don't want to deal with any of this. And then there's people who are like, I don't want to be alone, but like I am, or I feel alone or whatever. Like there's two camps of that. So it's like, I always kind of laugh when people are like, how to be alone. I don't need that book. I'm already alone. And I'm like, girl, it's just as much, or guy, whatever. It's just as much a book about like learning to like become your own best friend. Like it's not a book about shutting the world out. It's a book about like dealing with whatever cards life has dealt for you. And if that means that like, I think almost all of us like would like, more love, more connection, more acceptance in our lives. Like almost no one feels like, I always feel totally supported by everyone. I always feel super loved. Like, no, it's something that is really universal, interestingly enough. Yeah.
Well, especially now where a lot of us are, even people who aren't in relationships or who are in relationships are now alone because they're in quarantine, and depending on where they were in their relationship, maybe they're quarantining with somebody. How has that been for you? Did it make you reevaluate anything in terms of what you said in your book or how you are now in terms of relationships?
I get that question a lot, and it's interesting because no, not really. I think, I got a question. I did like a streaming book event the other night, and someone was like, if you like, what has changed? Like, if you had written like how to be alone after COVID, would it change? And the answer is no, because I'm the type of person who like, I had a difficult time feeling comfortable around people. I think like I had a lot of like fears around people for sure. And so subconsciously I would like become friends with people who like lived out of state or lived far away, and like all those things that like at the time I just thought like, yeah, I don't really like people who live, near where I'm at. The timing just doesn't work. Like I made kind of all these excuses for like why my close friends were always like really far from me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look back and I'm like, oh, I had issues like letting anybody get too close and becoming, having a best friend who lives in LA when you live in New York, maybe is something normal, or maybe is something that's like indicative of another thing. So the reason I say that is because for so much of my life, I had like internet friends, like people who live far away or whatever. And so a lot of people, when they're going through quarantine, they're like, it's so hard for me not to see my friends all the time. And I'm like, I am used to that. I'm used to like having internet friends. I'm used to, having long distance relationships, for better or worse. So I think it's interesting for, I think if anything, that makes it like a really great read for people who aren't used to that. Right. Because I think a lot of people are used to constantly, well, not a lot of people, I guess some people are used to constantly being around people and like constantly having those distractions of close friends, partners, parties, whatever, all those things that can distract you from like ever having to sit with your own thoughts. And I'm in the unique position of having spent a lot of my life by myself, where like I had to figure some stuff out. And like, if you don't have those usual distractions, I think that's something we're seeing a lot in COVID, where people are like, oh man, now I have to like deal with myself. I don't want to do that. It's like, we've got the time to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that I definitely relate, where it's like the only downside of COVID is that you do a lot of self-evaluation and you're thinking a lot, which I don't like to do.
Right.
I, like you, have a lot of friends that are distance, or I like going, part of what I miss about comedy, other than the stage, is going to a new city and like escaping and like being busy in that town to be like, oh, cool, I want to try the best waffles in Madison. That's what I want to do. But then now you're by yourself. But the part that, like you said, I don't mind being, I've always been alone and I like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But the part I don't like is everything's closed now. I'm a night owl, so everything's closed at like 10 or 11 here. So I can't go to, a diner and like work. I have to like sit with my thoughts or watch some stupid show. So.
Yeah, well, and so I think that like for touring comics and stuff, like that was a huge thing for me. Like I'm okay with, like you, I'm okay with like being by myself. I'm okay with, thinking about stuff deeply, because I'm somebody who like wants to figure things out. And I love, I kind of love that, because I don't know, I just want to constantly be getting better, like as a comic, as a person, all these things. But a big part of like my mental health was doing comedy every single, night, month, ever. Like I have been doing Tinder Live in New York City every single month, at least once a month for 6 years. And like, doing comedy constantly. Like it was just, I've never missed a show. Like I've done shows where I had like a fever. I've done shows on crutches. Like I just like, it was and if I wasn't performing comedy, then like I was performing with my band. Like I'm just somebody who was always performing. And then when I started touring, it was just like, it's like being alone plus, because like you're in a new city, and like the energy of the city, and knowing that you're performing, and like that feeling of like knowing that you're like the comic who's playing that night. It's just like I knew, like before the pandemic, I knew how essential that was to like my lifeblood, my mental health, my enjoyment of life, my serotonin levels. I thought I knew how important it was, but it is just, it's just, I miss it more than I even knew I could miss it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the serotonin levels that you described was literally what I said yesterday to a friend. doing that one show, even now they're opening up on patios in Chicago, just for one day to have that normalcy again was like all I needed. Cause I've done this whole, I've done the quarantine sober. I'm not like, you know, I'm not getting drunk every night. Some people are doing that. That's fine. And it's like, I need that. Otherwise I just keep eating. But,
same.
Which I've done too.
I keep making cobblers, and I'm like, this is not ever going to be a comedy show. I can eat all the cobblers in the world. It's never going to fill that void. Yeah.
And I forgot you touched upon that you're also a musician, which is awesome too. I used to be a musician before I did comedy. And what I tell comedians on the show is that they shouldn't date other comedians. They should date musicians or someone comedy adjacent, because you shouldn't be, it's kind of like don't shit where you work, where in any field, you don't sleep with people that you work with. And so for you, what advice do you give? Like, do you date comics or musicians? Because you can't do either technically under the rules of singles only.
I mean, so I've dated other comics, not a lot. I think I've only ever dated one comic. It was great until it really wasn't.
Yeah.
But you know, and then I've dated other musicians, and same story. You know, I mean, I think here's the tough thing for me, because yeah, I think for me, it's less of, it's hard because for me, ideally, I would date another creative person. Like that's what I need. And I've dated a lot of like doctors and lawyers and like people who are very smart, very ambitious. You know, our brains didn't work the same way, but like I need to date somebody who I like deeply admire and like deeply, like I love the way their brain works, because that's just, it's always very weird for me when like comics just date someone who's just like a silent fan. I'm like, what? That's enough for you? Like, no, I want someone who I'm just like, oh, your brain is so good and my brain's so good. And like together our brains are so like, it's like a chess match, but like not competitive, but just like, you're like high-fiving because you're both so dope. Like that's what I've always wanted. And so, you know, to me, when I date someone who's creative, I've heard from a lot of people who say like date someone who's creative in like a different way than you're creative.
Right.
But I don't know, man. I want someone who's creative in the same way. I just, it hits differently when like someone's also a writer, they're also a comic, or they're also a musician. And I'm just like, because I want someone who like I'm a fan of in that way, and like they're a fan of me. And like, you know, I think that it's hard not to see couples like George Burns and Gracie Allen are like an example I always go to, where I'm like, they were both so funny, they worked together, but like they made each other better, and they both were such fans of each other. And like, you know, RIP, but Will Arnett and Amy Poehler were really big for me, and I was just like, I want that.
That's a great example where it's like everyone was like, that's the perfect thing, and then it isn't. And with Gracie and George, first of all, I don't think that's a fair analogy, because that's a different time. Things were different. They didn't have internet and whatever else it is distracting people. And
Let me still dream.
We really don't know. We don't know. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but we really don't know. We really don't know what their relationship was. What if they, you know, who knows? But
well, I read his, and not that this is the full story, but I read so George Burns wrote a book that I really love called Gracie, A Love Story, and in it he talks about how like he talks about their whole relationship, and it's like a beautiful book, and it's like a female comedian's fucking like wet dream, because he just thought she was so funny, and he was just like, she was way funnier than me, and I'm like, oh, you weren't even competitive with her, you just like put her on a pedestal. Love it, we love it. But he does say that like at one point he like cheated on her with a showgirl, and he like really regretted it, but they had this like beautiful life. And again, we'll never know. It was just a book. That's just his telling. And again, you know, it's like
it's also telling that she didn't write a book, so we don't know her side of the story, right?
True fact. So, you know, I think it's tough because I hold both parts. I hold the parts that, you know, a lot of creative people, you know, you're coming into comedy, music, whatever. A lot of us have weird baggage, and it's like your baggage has to match up. I think that's mostly why a lot of comics are like, don't date comics, don't date other comics. But it's like, I don't know, you know, like it does happen. Like, you know, there are comedy couples. I think it's just really rare. And I think you just have to make very sure that like the other person is like healthy or at least like messed up in like
The
a
same.
complimentary way
Sure.
to you.
Well, what about, okay, so when you are looking for a well, first of all, are you looking to have, you know, later in life, do you see yourself getting married and having a traditional marriage or kids or anything like that?
I don't know if I don't really see kids. Like I've dated people where I've been like, oh my gosh, I could maybe see having children with you. That's intense. And like, you know, it has not occurred. But for the most part, I don't see that. I would just like to, I definitely want to get married. I definitely do. That's always been something that I've wanted. How traditional it'll be, I don't know, but like I'm a super romantic person and like again, I've always had this idea of romantic love as like, you know, we're just like best friends. And like, I think the other thing too, and like what I want in a partner is like, I want to be able to like work on stuff together in whatever way that means, you know, but that's like my dream. Like when I've dated people and like, I was like working out bits and they were like, oh, what if you tried this? And I was like, that is a good idea. I'm even more in love with you. Like that stuff's just like, whoo. That's my own like serotonin high. As opposed to like a partner who like, I don't know, unfortunately I need that. So it's like, I know that's a rougher road, but I would like that, you know, just I'm someone who like, I want to marry my best friend. I want to
Yeah.
marry like someone who I'm just like, they're the coolest person that I know. And like, they think I'm the coolest person they know. And like, I want to be one of those couples where like, you're like, oh my God, individually, they're so dope. And like the fact that they're together, like they just shine even brighter is like,
what efforts are you making, or how are you meeting people now? Because
no
obviously,
efforts whatsoever,
right.
friend.
Well, no, we're all in the same boat, obviously now. But like during
Yeah.
COVID, did you date anyone or go on any virtual dates or anything like that?
So so the last Tinder Live show I did was in Brooklyn, and it was right before like the lockdown. It was like the day before everyone was like, and we're done.
Right.
And I don't usually like on Tinder Live, like I'm going on, like I have a profile for Tinder Live that's like me, but it's not, because I was starting to get people be like, that's Lane Moore, I know who that is. And I was like, then this isn't fun. I have to make sure they don't
Right.
know that this is a exaggerated
So, right.
woman. But there was a guy that I was swiping through on my Tinder Live profile, and he seemed like really hot and cool, and I was like, nice. And he had an Instagram profile, and he also seemed like kind of funny, and he didn't take himself too seriously, and like, yeah, I loved it. So he had an Instagram profile, and so I reached out to him, and I don't really do this, but like I'm open to doing it. I reached out to him on Instagram, and I was like, hey, I do this show called Tinder Live, and like you came up, and like my profile is kind of like different, so I didn't like message you on there, but like you seem cool, and like I know this is a weird message, like I'm acknowledging how much information I'm throwing at you, but you know, I'm a real person and you seem cool. I don't know. He was so cool about it, and he like replied, and he was like, that sounds amazing, like how'd the show go? And I was like, oh my God, you're like asking me questions back, like bar is so low. And because sometimes you tell guys things like that, and they're like, rad, and I'm like,
Thanks.
no, you should think I'm already coming to you, like you have like a cool
Yeah,
girl,
that's
like
a ballsy move. Yeah, to have like a funny and attractive girl reach out to you on DM. So good move, good on him.
Yeah, and I'm
So
just
far,
like,
we don't know how the story ends. Okay, go ahead.
right, no shit. Yeah, so anyway, so like you know, without like going off into like every little nuanced bit, we just had this like lovely conversation, and he just like seemed funny and quick and like interested. And again, that's so important, and I know this happens to like men and women for sure, but it's interesting like how many men this happens with, which is like you start talking about like, that's the craziest thing. All right, I'm gonna go off on like a thing for a second, which is that so many guys will be like, you know, you can message first. But dude, so often when women do, men act like they're being interviewed. Like you like say something funny and they're like, ha ha. And you're like, all right, well, I'll ask another question. And they'll answer it, but they won't keep the conversation going.
Sure.
And I know men talk about that happening with women, but I'm like, y'all do it too. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That's definitely a sign of like, you know, you got to continue. It's like yes and you got to continue the conversation, right? Bring something.
Yeah, because then, and so when they don't, and I'm just like, screw this, unmatched, this conversation sucked. I'm sure they're shocked, but I'm like, you already, already the gender dynamic that we're not used to, I've already like slid past that. So like, you gotta come correct with this.
Right.
But anyway, so we started talking and he was really cool. And then it was just, he asked me out, but it was like, for when? Because, you know, when is this gonna even happen? And I didn't really want to necessarily do the like distance COVID dating thing. Like that didn't sound that great to me or safe or whatever. And so anyway, so then we were like talking for a while and we really got along, but he didn't want to like have Zoom calls. He didn't want to like FaceTime, like do any of that. And I was like, all right. And then like I would notice sometimes he would just kind of drop off completely. And I just was kind of like, all right, screw this. So I didn't write him any kind of like, screw you, I'm out. I didn't do that. I let it drop off. And he like, you know, he still follows me on Instagram. We'll still like stuff. I'm like, I don't really know what this is. Like we don't talk anymore. It was just hard for me. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like how we're supposed to do this because it's an undetermined amount of time. And you know, I think it was hard for me. Like you see things online where it's like, yeah, I met this guy online and like, he sends me like a bottle of wine and he like sent me food and we had like a socially distanced date. I know you look confused, but this is happening.
Yeah, it's happening. Sure.
And so like, I was just like, well, if that's occurring, I want that. Like if that's an option, how dare you not be sending me food?
Well, let's go back to that guy for a second. You didn't have a phone call with him? You didn't even have a conversation with him?
No, I had told him like when we had been talking for like a couple days, I was like, all right, well, what'd you say?
That's bizarre. Like, I mean, I'm a little older too, so it's like I like to, like if I match with someone I like, when I'm in the car, that's when I like to have conversations with people. I put on the speaker, I like listen, and I can talk to people on a phone while I'm driving. Especially when you're driving to shows, it was like that was my way to like stay in touch with my friends, my family, whatever. And if they're like, well, a lot of people don't like phone calls. A lot of girls that I've talked to are like, why are you calling me? It's like, all right, never mind. But in COVID, it makes sense. It's like, look, we can't see each other. If you're not going to do a Zoom, that's creepy too.
Exactly. So I had asked him after a few days of like this, like back and forth, like really fun messaging. And we obviously like had a lot in common. It was great. And I was like, all right. And he's also like, he was quarantined in like another state because he was like out of state for work and then quarantine hit. And so I was like, well, you're not going to be back in New York for a while. So like, how long are we going to do this like Romeo and Juliet shit? Like where we're like, you know, talking between a wall. And I was like, we're going to need to do like a FaceTime or something. And he was like, well, I feel like weird about FaceTime. I just feel really awkward when I use it, but maybe a phone call at some point. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be cool about this. I'll like respect, maybe you get nervous in front of FaceTime. I don't know why, but whatever, fine. And then he was like, maybe a phone call at some point, and then never brought it up again. And like, I don't want, not to sound like 90% of dudes on Tinder, but I don't want a pen pal in COVID in that way. Like, I don't want to just text.
Yeah.
If we could be talking on the phone, because like, it's one thing to be texting for a few days before you go out, but like, what? We're just going to text and we're never going to talk on the phone. Like, I don't know. I didn't like the lack of clarity around that. So I just kind of let it peter out. And like now every time I like see his stuff on social, I'm like, what even is like, I don't know if I'll hear from him when like COVID is over. I think I will, but I'm just like,
is he like married or something? Or does he know a relationship? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense.
I don't think so, but I'm just like, but I have had that when I first started Tinder, and there was not married, but like there was a guy, like one of the first Tinder dates that I went out on was this guy who I had this like great time with. And then we're supposed to go out on like a second date. And I'll never forget this. He was like, I think you're amazing. Like, I really like you. And we've been talking for like weeks after we went out on the date. And he was like, I want to go out on our second date. And I had this whole day planned and I'd hired a magician. Long story. Not sure I would have wanted to go on that. But
a magician? What?
A magician. Whatever. Then he said, but I can't go on it because I'm going through a breakup and the breakup fell through. I shit you not. It fell through like it was a job offer. And that was like a live-in girlfriend. He still lived with his girlfriend and they were gonna break up, but then they weren't. And he was like, feel free to make fun of me on Tinder Live. I know you're gonna. And I was like, I absolutely will. Thank you so much.
Breakup fell through. Yeah, that's an amazing, that whole concept is amazing. But yeah.
It was so incredible. I was just like, this sucks, but the material you're giving me, chef's kiss.
But what about the magician? Like, why would he hire a magician? Did he hire it because he thought like it was comedy adjacent and he was like, well, you're a comedian, you'll like a magician, or he just likes magic, and also how old is he? Like, I mean, like,
I don't remember, like, I think he was like 30, but he was like, I think he wanted to like give me like a really great date, and to him he was like, magic. And I was like, I don't know that I agree, but I appreciated that he had like put in the effort. He was like, I'm trying to think of like what you would like. I mean, it's always interesting, like when guys who aren't in comedy try to like take out a comedian, because like 9 times out of 10 they're like, do you want to go see a comedy show? And I'm like, absolutely not. Yeah, why would you think? Like, I've had so many guys who are like, first date, let's go to a comedy show because that's what you do. And I'm like, are you going to take a doctor to a hospital? Like, I don't want to. No. The last place I'm like going on a first date, dude.
But the magic thing is different because comedians have a love-hate with magicians. So I just was like, I wonder if he does that to everybody, or he was like, well, she's a comedian, or he's just into magic, which is kind of weird too, but okay.
It's dubious. Dubious
is a good word, yeah.
Yes, it really is, because I was just like, I mean, I don't know, but I think the sad thing was I was just so like excited that he'd like put in any sort of planning. And then it was like, before that too, like after the first date, I remember he did like a really smooth move that I thoroughly recommend. Again, the bar just couldn't be lower. But I was like, I really wanted to watch Pitch Perfect for whatever reason, and I couldn't find it streaming anywhere. And he like Venmo'd me like $5 or $10 or whatever it was to like buy it on iTunes. And I was like, whoo, look at you.
Baller move.
That's a move. That's a move right there.
It's like sending a beer to somebody that looks thirsty.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, I can't find it online. And he was like, here you go. Now you can rent it. And I was like, oh, this is a sex.
Prince Charming. Are there like, so you were talking
about a living girlfriend, but whatever.
Well, what? Like, so for me, if someone was like, I'm going to get a magician, I think I'd be like it wouldn't be a deal breaker, but I'd ask a lot of questions. Like, do you have situations like that where, like for me, if someone's got like, they're into something weird, like tap dancing or whatever, and I love that they are passionate about something, but is there something that you're like, that's a deal breaker now based on your experience, or like based on just common sense, like you're from Tinder Live or in real life where you're like, this doesn't end well?
Okay, so this is less like something that they're passionate about and more like something that they say. One of the biggest turnoffs, and I've heard a lot of comics say this, especially women. I try not to use the word female comics because I hate that phrase so much. But when you're talking about specifically women who are comedians, like you kind of have to. But I really hate it. And I've like made videos about this and mocked it a lot. But when you're on a date with a guy and you tell him you're a comedian, if you didn't already know, and he's like, I thought about doing that. And you're like, shut the fuck up. Like, no, who cares? Like, why do you need to say that? And what's interesting is whenever I've like tweeted about it or talked about it, so many women across professions, even outside of comedy, will say that guys do that to them. Like whatever their profession is, they're just like, I almost did that. And it's like, why can't you just say, that's so awesome. I love comedy. Like, that's plenty. But saying it to a woman specifically implies that like you could do it. Yeah. You could totally do what she does. And like devalue it.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot, but to be fair, it doesn't happen as much, but that happens to me all the time also, where women are like, can I, like, I've always wanted to like do it. I think I can do it. I'm like, okay, go, let's get you on an open mic. Cause I like to watch people see how hard it is to do what we do. But I do hear, I think for women,
Totally.
that it's another level where guys are already like intimidated by someone who's funnier than them or professional, and it's like it takes away their manhood. So
Totally. And I'm glad you acknowledge that, because I feel like there is an absolute difference. When women say it, it's like, I totally hear, like, across the board, you still feel like someone is making it sound like what you do is easy and anyone can do it. But there's an added level of when men do it that's like, because men have been so conditioned to believe that, like, they have two things they can offer a woman, right? It's like money or I can make them laugh. And like, you meet a woman and she's already like, I professionally make people laugh. So many guys have this like internalized misogyny that's like, and this like, oh no, now I have nothing to offer her. And it's like, no, dude, like, it's not a contest. Like, you can still make me laugh. I would still be thrilled for you to make me laugh. Like, I think comedians, most of us, like, want a partner who can make us laugh. Like, I'm not going to sit there. Like, I think guys feel like, well, what do I have to offer you now? And I'm like, dude, if you're still funny, I'm going to be hyped. Like, I'm not going to sit here criticizing, like, well, that was not a professional joke. Like, no one's doing that,
And it's also like, it's a different skill set. Like comedians like who do stand up live are different than people who are funny and like regular. Like my favorite comedians who I'm friends with are so funny on stage, but sometimes they're just like, they're just normal people. Totally. We're all normal people. We're not like, when you go on dates with someone, they just think they're like, okay, you don't seem very funny. I'm like, I'm not on the clock. I didn't know that, like, that's why you're going out with you. Do you think I'm just going to run like bits by you? So.
Yeah, it's like, and it's like a catch-22, I think, with comics too, where it's like, you feel like you can't win because you've got one of two sides. You can either be like a person where they're just like, you're a comic, and you're like, yeah, Jesus. Or if you are really funny, then it's like, then they think you're on, and you're like, no, I'm just being, forget it. Like, you can't, it's a weird thing. And like, I know so often, interestingly, on when I'm meeting guys, I've stopped saying I'm a comic right off the bat. When they ask me what I do, I'm like, I'm a musician. Will you be nicer to me?
Yeah, that's
because they're both true, but I like kind of lead with that. But then even that, you're still gonna get the same.
I used to play guitar.
Like, I don't care though. Like, I do it professionally. Like, what? Like, why do you have to be like this? Just say that's so rad. What do you play? Oh my God, that's so cool. Like, why can't it be something that you just think is so cool about me and makes you want to do more? Why does it have to, now it's a contest?
Well, that's the thing.
Like
No, you're right. I mean, that's why it's such a hard thing that we talk about on the podcast now, where you can't date regular people because of that mindset, especially for women. They have another level of like guys being intimidated by them, but then you can't date other comedians because it's toxic most of the time. I know that there's this George Burns Gracie thing you think is going to happen.
I know that it worked 70 years ago.
Well, Tom Segura and his wife, I forgot her name right now, but they've got a happy relationship. I know a couple.
There's a lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. But for every good one, I can name you 20 that ended in disaster, where you're like, especially.
And then you have to see them all the time, and all your friends know each other, and it's weird, and like, absolutely. So yeah.
So it's a hard thing, and like you said, like you want that creative, and you're attracted to the brain, but you can't date a doctor really, because unless they have weird hours like we do, because you're never going to see them. So it's a hard thing. That's why I always push for musicians. Like, I don't know. I think dating a musician is for a comedian, but for you, I mean, have you dated musicians? Is it the same shit? Because I feel like it's not. I mean, they know the hustle, they understand the hustle, but it's not the same like as comedy. Where when I was musicians, like, okay, you have a bad show, it's like, okay, well, they don't like alt country, but when you have a bad show as a comedian, it's like they don't like you, like they don't like your story.
Right.
So is it can you date musicians because it's less competitive and less toxic?
I mean, when I dated a comedian, I don't think it was competitive though. That wasn't the issue. I guess what I would say is this: I've dated a comedian and I've dated a musician, and I didn't notice any competition in either one.
Okay.
That was not the issue. So I think that for me, I don't know. I like, because that's what everybody always talks about, where they're like, if you date someone who does what you do, there's going to be a level of competition. I don't think so. Not if you genuinely love each other.
Well,
Like,
it's not just, it's not just the competition. It's just that you're in the same, you're in the same environment all the time.
Right.
Where you don't have that break, or you don't have that discourse where you can just be like, or you can just separate for a moment. But the competition is part of it too. And like one person succeeds and it fucks up the dynamic. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because it's like, then sometimes, I guess I like the idea of like, I mean, I know they're split up now, but it's like, you have like Cameron and Rhea who like ended up working together. Like there's that potential. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess what I would say across the board is that I have never, I would not say that my relationships with fellow creative people didn't work because we were both creative people. They didn't work because, we had different attachment styles. And like, I mean, I think for me, why things haven't worked is either like they were not a great person, or like they were going through some stuff and they like, had some, we didn't have like compatible issues, like, and they like, had trust issues or whatever it was. So, but it was never like, oh, this isn't going to work because we're in the same industry. Like that wasn't it at all. It was like, oh, either like you're not a very nice, healthy person, or like, oh, the timing is bad, like normal relationship things. Like, So I think that's why I always like when people are like, oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, oh, I think you can. It's just that it has to be a healthy person. I think that if you're dating someone who's a healthy person and you're a healthy person, as much as can be expected.
A healthy comedian? A healthy comedian? That's an option.
I know, but I'm working on it. It's like, there are plenty of comics who are like working hard to be healthy people. And then there's plenty of people who are like, screw it. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to revel in this and like, whatever, that's fine. But, I'm working on becoming a healthy person. I know there's a lot of talk in comedy that it's like supposed to be like funny to just be like, it's supposed to be like more fun. And I'm just like, no, like, I think I do really great work. Like I've written jokes when I was like in a really good place, and I've written jokes when I was in a bad place. Like my goal is to be a comedian and be really happy. Like, I know we think those are like diametrically opposed, but like, I think maybe because my life's been really hard that like, I want to eventually, I want to have both. And I think, I'm getting to that place where it's like, I've done comedy where it was like, life was just this endless slog. And I've done comedy where I was like, you're still always going to have issues, but I don't know. I just I don't subscribe to the like, oh, I hope I'm constantly suffering because it's for my art. Like I've suffered plenty. I have plenty of material to last me the rest of my life. If another bad thing never happened again, I just knocked on a table that's not wood, I would have plenty of material.
I knocked on wood for you. That's fine. Yeah, I think, well, I don't know. I still stand by my decision that I tell people not to date other comedians. But I do think the musician thing is a good angle. And like you said, there wasn't a competition, and there's different instruments. Obviously you can date a drummer, you can date a bassist. Bassist is probably not the way to go, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, well, I've said enough. We are out of time. Lane, where could people find out more about you and pick up the book, How to Be Alone, and the Tinder Live stuff?
Yeah. So I do Tinder Live every single month at Littlefield in New York City when there's not a pandemic. I'm going to be doing supposed to be on the road all year this year. Hopefully I can be back on the road soon. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Hello Lane Moore. And there's also an at Tinder Live on Instagram. You can find How to Be Alone. Support your local bookstores is always good. There's also an audiobook that I read, and like I play guitar and I sing on it, and that's pretty cool. And It Was Romance is the band. So you can find all the things on the internet.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lane, for doing the show. I really appreciate it. And everybody, please get the book. I highly, highly recommend the book, and check out Lane Moore at Hello Lane Moore.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lane. Thank you all for watching and listening to another edition of Singles Only Podcast.
But I'm still